Okay, hello, welcome everyone to this, the first webinar in the new barn raising webinar series. My name is Gareth Potts. I'm the guy who's been sending you all these emails to promote the webinar series. This term, the new barn raising, really what it's about is the idea of different types of organisation and different types of individual helping to support community and civic assets. So it's everything from neighbourhood parks and libraries right through to major civic theatres, museums, things like that. These are typically places that are very accessible to different groups in society and that people feel a strong sense of ownership over. And in terms of the different types of organisations, it can be local government, it can be business, it can be charitable foundations, which are particularly important in the United States. It can be non-profits such as Friends of the Library or Friends of the Museum. It can be trade unions. It can be social enterprise, and I'll talk a little bit about social enterprise presently. And then in terms of individuals, it can be everyone from very wealthy philanthropists through to people giving through small crowdfunding campaigns and helping to volunteer at their local park or their local library. And in terms of what those people are doing and what they're looking to sustain, and is the idea of raising awareness. So it's awareness about the importance of these different types of assets and about the asset offer that people have on their doorstep. It's about raising resources, which in particular means raising money, but can also mean raising equipment that's being given by companies, for example. And then it's about raising volunteer help. So that really is what the new barn raising is about, looking at the different roles those organisations and people can play. In terms of today's webinar, the focus is on social enterprise and local government. In particular, what I mean by social enterprise really is an organisational form, and it can have different legal entities, legal forms. That's not local government delivery, and it's not delivery by for-profit private business. So local government might fund some of this activity, but really it's a different type of activity and a different type of organisation that exists between those two ends of the spectrum. And what I'm trying to ask today and what we're trying to look at is how can those organisational forms, what is it about them that have particular advantages in terms of helping to sustain assets? And then following from that, the second question really is what role can local governments, so city government, and maybe even state government in the US and elsewhere, what role can they play in helping to sustain social enterprises and help them to sustain assets? In terms of today's speakers, I'm very delighted they both agreed to speak. Just a few brief words about both speakers. Jim Beirne is Chief Executive of Live Theatre in Newcastle-upon-Tyne, a city in northeast England. Several years ago, Jim was awarded an MBE by the Queen for his services to theatre. And for those of you outside the UK and the Commonwealth, MBE as a member of the British Empire, it's a very distinguished award. Jim also chairs a local partnership, the Newcastle Gateshead Cultural Venues Group. And Gateshead, I should point out, is a city just over the river from Newcastle. It also has a very attractive arts offer. On an international level, Jim is a fellow of the National Arts Strategies Culture and Community Programme. And in previous lives, he's had senior performing arts management roles at the Bluecoat Centre in Liverpool and for the former Yorkshire Arts Board. The other presenter today, Tom Hoch, is President and CEO of Hennepin Theatre Trust in Minneapolis in Minnesota. The trust itself is also a key driver in the Hennepin Cultural District, and Tom will be saying a little bit about that today. Tom was also recently elected the chair of the Minneapolis Downtown Council and the Downtown Improvement District. That's a joint body. And then his previous work has included working for the city of Minneapolis in what is today its Community Planning and Economic Development Division. And amongst his key work for the city was actually helping to save and sustain theatres. So he's experienced, if you like, of both sides of the spectrum today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Tom to talk to you about the Trust's work. So Tom, over to you, please. Thank you.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you, Gareth. As he said, my name's Tom Hoch, and I am the President and CEO of Hennepin Theatre Trust. Hennepin Theatre Trust is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and as he indicated, I have been here at the theaters about 18 years. My background is previously was working with the city of Minneapolis. I did real estate development as a project manager, and actually that is how I first got involved with the theaters on Hennepin Avenue. You can see where Minneapolis is. We're situated pretty much right in the middle of the country. We have a very vibrant theater scene, and we are also lucky because we are home to a number of Fortune 500 companies. There again, you can see where we're located. We are located right in, pretty much in the heart of downtown Minneapolis. And the three theaters we have are, three historic theaters, are the Orpheum Theater. The Orpheum was constructed in 1921. You can see there's an interior shot of it. The State Theater across the street, there's the exterior. An interior shot was constructed in 1921 as well. The Orpheum, by the way, has 2,650 seats. The State Theater has 2,150. And then on the next block down is the Pantages Theater. And here's an interior shot. That has 1,014 seats. That was constructed in 1916. So as I said, all of these sit on Hennepin Avenue, and Hennepin Avenue is a street right through the heart of downtown Minneapolis. There are about 15,000 cars per day, as well as buses that move up and down Hennepin Avenue. Here's another shot of Hennepin Avenue. And just another shot of the exterior of the Orpheum Theater. The three theaters have all been restored. The State Theater was restored in 1990 as part of a larger project that is an office tower development, and actually was the watershed case for historic preservation in the city of Minneapolis. At the time, the developer needed some city assistance in order to get the development done. The developer did not want the theater and wanted to get it torn down. Ultimately, the developer did not prevail. The city decided to retain the theater, and it was my job, actually, because I was handling the development for the block, to get the theater restored and get it integrated into that larger project. That was restored for $8.5 million at the time, and that was reopened in 1990. Just before that theater opened, the Orpheum Theater, which was owned by singer-songwriter Bob Dylan, came on the market, and the city decided to acquire that, so acquired it for $1.4 million US dollars, which sounds like a bargain when I look back at it now. It didn't feel like it at the time, and decided to operate it. And it was at that point that the city really began to think about the possibility of really creating, a vibrant theater scene in downtown Minneapolis. There had been some touring Broadway productions, but we were really kind of a B-level market in that regard, and so the opportunity, began to emerge to create a more vibrant downtown. I joined the theaters in 1996, and ironically, the day I started, was the day that the owner of the Pantages Theater, the smallest of the three, applied for a demolition permit for the city. We, at that point, mounted a pushback to keep that from happening, using the argument that we were trying to create a theater district here and that we needed that third theater in order to do that, and ultimately prevailed, and were able to get the theater restored and reopened in 2002. Because I had worked with the city, I knew that the city the city owned these three theaters and was overseeing their operation. I was the chief executive overseeing the management of the theaters, I knew that the city really hadn't wanted to be, in a long-term permanent ownership position relative to these structures. And so I suggested to the city that I would found a nonprofit that could then own these theaters, operate them, maintain them in perpetuity, and the city could extricate itself from this situation. So after several complicated years of negotiating, in December of 2005, we entered into a long-term lease to own for the three theaters, the Orpheum State and Pantages theaters. And the city had sold some bonds and done some other financing in order to get the theaters restored. And at that point, the city then issued new taxable bonds, obligations to repay, for just over $21 million. And in exchange for them doing that, we agreed that we would step into the position of managing and maintaining these theaters, paying off the bonds, making sure that the theaters were programmed. And if we did those things for the period of time of the lease, the city would then convey the theaters to us for $1. So we are about 10 years into that process now. The city imposed a variety of performance requirements, and they were imposed, but they were actually ultimately negotiated. So we have a certain number of events that we need to produce each year in the theaters, and of various types, and then a number of patrons that we need to attract through the doors of the theaters. Last year we brought 513,000 people through the doors of the theater, which I think exceeds anybody's expectations truly for our success. The city's initial interest in these theaters was really twofold. What it was not about arts and culture. It was really about historic preservation and about economic development. So the city's, our agreement with the city tends to be very much reflective of the city's interest in attracting a lot of people to downtown, having the theaters be very, very busy, and we have done that. We are, however, not an economic development entity. We are an organization that is a theatrical presenter and producer. And so it is really the intersection of those two things, the economic development. We say we do economic development through the arts, and that is, I think, ultimately what the city wanted. Practically speaking, with the financing, the city sold the bonds, and a variety of, some individuals and institutional investors purchased them, which is the way the bond market works in the U.S. And as I said, we are obligated to repay those over a 20-year period of time. They carry a fixed interest rate. There are a couple of different series, but that's not too germane for our conversations here. And we are on track with making those debt service repayments. So here's a little bit of the financing. As I indicated, there are three theaters. The underlying title for these facilities is owned by the city, and we operate them under that lease-to-own agreement with them. And it was really actually about $21.1 million in revenue bonds, taxable revenue bonds that were sold to finance this. We handle all the programming. As I said, we're responsible for all the operating and maintenance costs of the theaters. And finally, as I indicated, ownership of the facilities transfers to us upon completion and satisfactory completion of the lease requirements, which we're on track to do. And I should say, practically speaking, we report to the city on a semi-annual basis relative to those requirements. Once we got these theaters up and running, and this is for anybody who operates historic facilities, you may have had this experience where Hennepin Avenue wasn't always a beautiful street and the theaters weren't beautiful. And so we got them restored and began to attract large numbers of people to downtown Minneapolis. But what we quickly realized is that the experience for our theater patrons started outside the door of our theaters. And we needed to do something about that. So we actually created a cultural district, or a theater district rather, that ran for about 5 blocks outside the theaters. And I went out and I got the property owners to all agree to be assessed for new sidewalks, new lighting, really to some planters, trees, that kind of thing, to make it a more walkable environment. That has served us very well. But we, over a few years, realized that actually our patrons were coming from a broader area and parking perhaps farther away, and that we really needed to be concerned about the area through which they were walking. The other thing is that we realized that there were a lot of cultural assets along the street, but they were by and large not very connected. So there was this inconsistent experience, a good block, a bad block, a good block, a bad block. And so we got the notion that we could actually knit these disparate pieces together by planning for and creating a cultural district. So we, a couple of years ago, went to the National Endowment for the Arts, and in response to a funding opportunity that they had, and presented them with a proposal for the creation of a cultural district. They were intrigued by that and decided to fund us. So we spent about 18 months planning for a cultural district. And as we define this cultural district, it is a walkable center of arts, culture, and economic activity. Here's a brief map of that cultural district, and at one end is the really world-renowned Walker Arts Center, and there's the main street that runs through that map that you're seeing is Hennepin Avenue, so you can see where the Orpheum State and Pantages Theaters sit, and then the avenue runs to the Mississippi River. So our idea is really to connect Hennepin and the streets on either side, really using arts and culture as that connective tissue, making every block a great block. And you can clearly see, I think, that this is one reason, you know, I have been interested in the Minneapolis Downtown Council and chairing that committee, because this is really very much about arts and culture and its role in city building. Okay, so I just gave you some background on this, you know, and this is again an overview of what the cultural district really is and where it runs, and it's probably only germane to you if you happen to know Minneapolis very, very well. But we did complete our plan, and then we took it to the city, and the city actually formally approved this cultural district plan. So we identified we're in the process of implementing that plan now, and there were several short-term goals that we sought to achieve. And here they are: creating a no vacancy project, investing in distinctive public art, building more visual stimulation, and developing a cultural district brand. And I should say that over that 18-month period of time, we brought in, really, nationally renowned speakers. We had some 1,500 people pretty intimately engaged in the process. So we really got a lot of input into this plan. And I said, after giving over 18 months of my life to this, I wanted to be certain that the plan didn't end up on a shelf and that we were actually implementing it. So what you see here is us going about implementing it. I should say, too, that these historic assets are really, at the heart of what we are doing. We are not giving up our theatrical enterprise. We are actually building on the success of what we have going here. In fact, that's one of the precepts for this entire plan, is that all of us, the Walker Arts Center, the theaters, we have a Caesar Pelli designed library, we have active engagement with the riverfront. Those are all successful, and our goal is really to build on each of those successes. So looking back here, I just showed you our no vacancy project. One of the things we heard from people was that when they were coming to the theater or even just walking around downtown is that, you know, all cities have this. You have the occasional vacant storefront. And one of the things that we learned from people was that those vacant storefronts are part of what makes, you know, a block feel uneven or unwelcoming or unengaging or scary. So we focused right away on what we could do to fill those vacant storefronts. So we developed a program that we call Made Here, and it is about the work that local artists do here, hence it's Made Here. And this is just one of the storefronts that we did. This particular storefront had been vacant for 25 years, and we were able to go in and actually like buff off some scratched and graffiti on the glass. And I said sometimes all you have to do is wash the glass, and that alone transforms the space. But this is just one sample. We are really proud of what we have been able to accomplish. We are just planning our 4th installation right now. Of the first 3, we have installations. We have had 106 installations over 16 city blocks. We have had diversity of artists. They've been roughly gender balanced, 50% men, 50% women, and we've had about 40% artists of color. So it is, in our opinion, meeting all of our goals in terms of how the program itself would work. We are beginning to gain a lot of acceptance among property owners in downtown Minneapolis who are actually now beginning to pay us to create some installations. So that's particularly exciting, since previously we were raising the money to fund these installations. I should say that our role is to identify the space. We convene an artist advisory group that we have been working with. They are the ones who curate this. On our last open call for 30 windows, we had 86 responses for that. We execute the agreement with the property owner and provide the insurance, and we always pay artists for the work that they do. Here's another one. This is an underpass, and our plan is to install artist-inspired installation to transform a dark, dreary place into something that is walkable and connected on the other side of this bridge. Really is the Walker Art Center, and they have a beautiful sculpture garden that is just being redone. So again, looking for ways that we can use art and culture to create connection. Crosswalks, we have a program right now called Curb Appeal. We're waiting for funding from the NEA. We are very optimistic that we will get it to create 38 artist-designed crosswalks all along Hennepin Avenue. We have a whole, this would be in summer of 16, we have this whole idea around engagement for artists and the community around that. And then we are creating a cultural district brand. We have it done, but I'm not going to show it to you yet because that's a whole nother presentation, and I don't want you to walk away with a partial idea of what it is we're trying to do here. But clearly, having a brand for this area is important. You know, this is really an outgrowth of placemaking, and so we want the brand to clearly create a place, create a way for people to talk about that place, to reference that place, so that the idea is ultimately when they come to the theaters, they will be, they'll participate in 3, 4, or 5 things rather than just 1 or 2.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Tom. I'm going to pass you over now to Jim Beirne, who is in Newcastle-upon-Tyne in northeast England. Jim, over to you, please.
Actually quite a lot of commonalities between what Tom has just been talking about and live theatre. So live theatre is in Newcastle-upon-Tyne. We're just by the River Tyne. Newcastle is a great former port and shipbuilding city. Live theatre has been going for 40 years, and this presentation is very much about the entwining of culture and economy, the fact that I think they go together to make a creative and successful city. This is our lovely theatre. It's only 200 seats, but we're a new writing producer. That's what we do, make new plays. So it's a perfect scale and size for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how a medium-scale organisation, there's 40 people in the organisation, sorry, there's 30 people in the organisation, and our turnover is around about £2 million every year. But I'm going to talk about how we've raised about £22 million or $32 million in the last sort of 7 or 8 years by using our mission, our intellectual property, our physical assets, and by understanding the communities that we connect with in the city. Live is recognised across the country really as a national trailblazer in developing new strategies for sustainability. So here's just some of our ancient buildings. Tom said about buildings, we live in very old buildings. Some of them are 500 years old. This is one of our writers' rooms. So our mission really is to create new plays of world-class quality, to develop creative talent, to unlock the potential of young people, and to develop new models of sustainability and growth. In the UK, we're about one of 6 new writing producers, and we are much more than a theatre. So in the past sort of couple of years, we've helped Sting with his latest musical, which unfortunately hasn't been that successful. We've taken our shows, The Pitman Painters by Lee Hall, to the West End, to the National Theatre, and to Broadway. We've done national tours of plays by Alan Plater and Peter Strawn. We've actually done 2 productions in the Houses of Parliament. And last year, the best 10 new plays, a new play by Paddy Campbell called Wet House. So that just gives you a sense of some of the productions, but education and arts education is very important to us. Live started as a Marxist co-op, wanting to make art accessible to the people of the city. And so education has run through its history. And these pictures are of new plays by 9-year-olds. And just to sort of give you an example, really, 4 of the actors in these shots were in the Broadway production of Pitman Painters. So we bring the same amount of integrity as we do to our mains. But in 2006, we were completing the theatre redevelopment. We have a beautiful set of rehearsal rooms, studio theatre, writer's room, a new entrance, restaurant, and the like. So we were going to be considerably bigger, and we knew that our box office was unlikely to grow very much because it was already at around 90%. We knew that fundraising was unlikely to increase because our fundraising was very good. And we knew that we were greatly respected by the Arts Council and by the city because you know, our funding had gone up, you know, over the years. And was very unlikely to go up very more. So looking to the future, we knew we had to do something about it ourselves in terms of deriving new income streams. We came across the notion of social enterprise in about 2003-04, and it seemed like a really great model to develop. We looked at our assets, at what we had. We looked at our people, our ideas, and our buildings. And we knew that we wanted to create long-term income streams. What we didn't want to do was raise a significant sum from a funder for 2 years and then you'd have to find that money again. We were looking to the long term, more of an endowment model than an income and expenditure annual model. So that was likely to bring us into creating assets. And about the same time, I heard the story that you could walk from Cambridge to London on Cambridge University land. So effectively the university had been investing in property and assets for 500 years. And I figured that why couldn't a small new writing producer in Newcastle do the same thing? So we have 4 social enterprises. We have a gastropub run by a former Michelin-star restaurateur. We have a digital online training program for playwrights. We have an incubator for small businesses. And we have a major capital project that we're right in the middle of now called LiveWorks. we're doing this using social finance funds. So basically, we always hope to get grants. Grant is good because you don't have to pay it back. It's never free. You have to do lots of work to get grants. But realize that actually, if we were dealing in assets, we were likely to get into the territory of borrowing money one way and another. And we've up using the whole kind of continuum or toolkit of financials to support the charity in the long term. So grant, soft loans, government lending, and commercial loans and equity. And that money has come from the European Regional Development Fund, the Arts Council, both of whom you might expect we would, but the Charities Aid Foundation, and more recently and more innovatively, I think, from borrowing from the council. I think we're probably one of the first organisations in the country to tap into prudential borrowing, which is what a city can do. It's money usually used for infrastructure, but we persuaded the city to invest in this project. So LiveWorks is a mixture of all of those things. So the Broad Chare, our gastropub, basically we spent £400,000 doing it up. It was our building. It opened in May 2011. As I said, it's run by a former Michelin star chef, and it pays for a play a year. It nets us now about £125,000 a year. We have no management responsibility. We were involved in the design. We even own the ovens, but basically it's ours and that income we get. So it feels like it's been there forever. We have our own special beer. Yeah, there we go. We have our own special beer called the Writer's Block, which I hope you'll figure out why it's called the Writer's Block, being a new writing organisation, and some very famous Scotch eggs that if I have time I'll come back to. But it's been voted as one of the best gastropubs in Britain. It's actually made us a lot of money in many different ways. beaplaywright.com has 170 customers, about 50% of whom have paid about £500 to do a 5-seminar course. And at the end of each seminar, you get feedback on your exercises and your writing. Embedded in it are lots and lots of interviews by famous writers covering everything from plot to character to dialogue to getting your production on. The Schoolhouse was a building that was attached to Live Theatre. It cost us about £900,000 to purchase and refurbish, and it's now let out to small cultural businesses and earning us about £35,000 a year, which is effectively a small education project for us. So I keep coming back to our mission when I talk about the income that we derive from some of these projects. Very beautiful 1753 former schoolhouse. So that brings us on to LiveWorks. So Live Theatre is as I said, a medium-scale cultural organisation, but we now own basically this corner of the city. We've bought the street down to the corner, the buildings on the front of the quayside, and the empty plot of land. So we're, I suppose, a substantial property owner now. The purpose for doing that, well, I'll show you the next slide. We are building a new office block on the front in sandstone as some of the other ancient buildings. This is it on the front. And then on the back, we're creating an outdoor stage, a children's literacy centre, and a park for the people of this part of the city. That's it at night. And what it is, it's a 10 million, it's actually more like an 11 million pound project now. It cost us about 5 million pounds to purchase. It's cost us just over 5 million to build. It's about 2/3 built now. It's a very valuable site. It's the last empty site on Newcastle's quayside. And whilst it £1 million to make happen, it will be worth much more than that in 5, 10 and 20 years time. So we've borrowed £6 million from the city, this prudential borrowing, which is at very beneficial interest rates. You'd always want to be lending from a friend rather than a bank, and I consider the City Council to be a friend of live theatre. We've raised about £2.5 million from Europe, and we've just been given £2 million from the Arts Council, and we raised another £1 million in fundraising. So the initial income will be about £200,000 a year, but totally, in terms of the amount of unrestricted income that those 4 social enterprises will give us, will be about £500,000 a year. So it's £500,000 of additional income, and it's an incredible set of assets that I think in the long term will only go one way in terms of value. So it gives to the city a cultural return, a social return, and indeed a financial return. And so I've sort of scratched my head and wondered why we've managed to raise so much of these resources. Clearly, we're a great new writing theatre with, very important productions going around the world. We're seen as a great educationalist, and we support and develop artists. We're very well known for that. So we have our audiences, and we have very good audiences. We have a youth theatre of about 300 young people coming through our doors every week. We have a community of artists. About 200 artists and arts workers will work for Live every year. And we have relationships with the universities and colleges. We train and deliver some courses. And now we have new businesses in our Schoolhouse and in the new Live Works building. There will be about 160 people working in the new office building. And there will be people using the park and the Children's Writing Centre, families, volunteers. And we also have the 2 best restaurants in the city, great Italian restaurant and a great gastropub. And I think the reason that people have supported us is that at the heart of what we do is great art, but that it is very much embedded in the community in which we're here to serve. But there are people that will sit in the pub and talk very fondly of Live because they like our offer and they may not have seen any of our productions. And it's all of these things, these many different networks, these many different people that I think lead you to getting this kind of investment. The aim of any cultural institution in any city is to be loved by the people of the city, and I think we are. So we've restored these ancient buildings, we've given them a real future, we've engaged with many different communities, and we've become entangled, whether it is the new plays by 9-year-olds, the work we do with young refugees, or opening new productions in London. We're engaged with all of those things. And we've been in partnership with many organizations, other theatres around the world and around this country. And being, having that broad network brings you more friends and it brings you more supporters, and it makes you politically embedded in the place in which we work. So we would feel that we would transformed audiences, young people, artists, and indeed transformed this corner of the city and altered the perception of what we think a cultural organisation is and what it can do. I've just done a seminar earlier on today, and people have asked me, why do you think, what are the reasons for live theatre's success? And I think it's fairly simple. I think it's that we've taken time. This has taken us 8 years. We've had a great plan, and we've done it one by one. And each of those things that we've done, we've proved, like any arts organization often does, makes them successful. And so by the time we come to an £11 million office development on the quayside, people think we can do it. And so that's our story.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Jim. I'm going to move on now to the Q&A session. Thanks to everyone who sent things through. There's still time for additional questions, so ask away. Looking at what's come through so far. Question for Tom about are there any other examples of the cultural districts such as the one that you're establishing in Minneapolis?
Yeah, there are. There are some in a couple of different cities. I would look at Playhouse Square in Cleveland, but probably the premier example is of the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust in Cleveland. That's been in place for about 30 years, and they have done amazing things there. They own a lot of real estate in the area, and they were 35 years ago they took advantage of the fact that the industry was changing in their town, and they were able to galvanize the support of primarily 3 major foundations to help them reach out and really begin to rapidly acquire some real estate that has really served them very well in terms of their ability to both control the environment, get hold of it, and to create some revenue opportunities to support their cultural activities.
Okay, and a question here for both speakers. How have the 2 projects addressed the challenges and potential of including disabled artists and audiences?
Well, I think from our point of view, at Live Theatre, we have a big open access art for children and young people, able-bodied or disabled, and we have the same policy with our audiences, and all the buildings that we have built and all the things that we have done with them, we have made a whole bunch of historic buildings physically accessible, which is a hard thing to do with ancient. So it's the approach of engagement and inclusiveness that runs through Live Theatre's mission. That's aside from commissioning plays with disabled artists, and which we have done all of those things.
Yeah, I'll say the challenge of converting historic structures, which is they're not as historic as Jim's, but they're old in our world, is challenging. But we have made them accessible to differently abled audience members. We also have reached out specifically to artists of that community to ensure that they are included as well in that example that I gave you of the Made Here Storefront initiative.
Okay. Another question, brilliant city-based projects. Can we share any lessons with smaller community settlements? And I think that's for both of you. Jim, do you want to go first as Tom just spoke?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking about what the lessons that we've learned. If you want to make some major change in a place, you need to give yourself enough time, because to gather the supporters around you takes a lot of doing, and it doesn't matter how small I think that the projects are or the places are. It's about taking it in sensible steps and convincing the people that matter, or the investors potentially, that you're really good with what you're doing, and that if they invest in you again, you'll deliver again. So I think that approach is an approach that you'd take anywhere, wherever you're working on a cultural project.
I think that in a smaller community, there actually might be a lot of opportunity. I know that in my world, in Minneapolis, we're frequently cited as having, more theater seats per capita than any other city in the U.S. outside of New York. So we have actually a lot of competition for what we're doing. And, the ability to not have so much competition and be, the game in town that plays to people's sensibilities, relative to the cultural arena, I think about that having a lot of appeal. The other thing is to ensure that, I think what's clear from what Jim has said is, figuring out a way to, have a footprint that is big enough and diverse enough to reach people in a whole lot of different ways. I know that we have what we call partnerships with some 20 restaurants in downtown Minneapolis, because they all understand the value of what we do in terms of attracting people to downtown Minneapolis. So those partnerships come back to us in a whole lot of ways, in funding, in terms of in-kind support. These restaurants host opening night parties, but what happens is that a big chunk of the community is really invested in our success, and that has made us more successful.
Okay, thank you, Tom. We have a question from West Kentucky, a very lovely part of the world. How do you engage all of the community? Again, I think that's for both people.
I think one of the things you have to do is to go to the place that you're trying to attract. So with our arts education program, we deliberately work in tougher parts of the city. We're in the city centre by the river, but we deliberately go out and run workshops, on a regular basis. So it's part of the annual program. And then we bring those young people to the theatre, and they get engaged with some of the stuff that happens in the education programs at the theatre. So how do you engage all of the community? I think it's a very important question, because making theatre and culture more generally not just a middle class pursuit is incredibly important, and it gets more important as public sector resources disappear. And so I think you have to go to the community, you have to engage them, and then when you bring them to your arts venue, it needs to be just the most fantastic experience for them. So that's all about the culture of the organization as well.
I completely agree with what Jim just said, and one of the specific examples that I can think of is the Made Here storefront initiative that I was showing on the slide. We consciously assembled a diverse group of artists. I think there are 17 who are really the curators, of the storefront project. And the result of having a diverse group of individuals at the table making decisions has enabled us to, first of all, they are part of the open call, so they're actually able to help us reach out into their specific communities and to bring more people in. And because the people sitting at the table making the decisions are a diverse group of people, people feel like there is an openness to diversity, and I think that has meant that we have had a very interesting, eclectic, and diverse array of window installations.
Okay, thank you, Tom. This question here is quite straightforward, Ron. I think I can answer this. Will the webinar be made available? Yes, it will. There's going to be probably make the first one available very soon after this, but generally speaking, there's going to be a delay, probably of a couple of months, just to try and make sure more people participate in the real live event. There's a website called thenewbarnraising.com. There's lots of free materials on there. There's a YouTube channel. And once this has all been edited, it will go on there. So all this is free, and that's the place to go. thenewbarnraising.com. The website is should be on the technical issues part of your screen at the moment. Just a final question, because I don't see any more questions coming in, and we're nearly out of time. For both speakers, really, this session has been about this concept of social enterprise. And I suppose different financial contexts in both cities. But if you were to make, if you were given the option, for example, of just having, very full public sector coffers, there was lots of taxpayers' money from state and from city, would you make case would you make for your organisational forms carrying on, persisting and being almost like the ideal type? Could you both say a bit about the type of organisations you are versus government versus the market, and private sector business?
So, Garrett, are you asking, if I wanted, a lot of government support, how would I pin that argument?
No, I'm saying if that support was available, if you were thinking of, say, how the theatre should be run, and perhaps more generally the arts, what case would you make for having a trust running theatres, say, as opposed to city council doing it and city council funding it, or it all being, for profit?
Well,
for profit organisations.
Well, in my part of the country, I think it makes it very difficult, first of all, to raise additional money if the government is front and center, because most individuals would believe that they are already paying for the privilege, through their tax dollars. So, I mean, that would be the response that I would get. The other thing is that I just had this conversation with a small city in Minnesota where they're restoring a theater, and they were trying to figure out, the city is going to own the theater, but what should they do thereafter? And, I think for elected officials in this country, I think they really don't want to be in the position of programming theaters. They don't want to be making the decisions about what is on stage, and they don't want to have to defend them. And, the decision about what goes on our stage actually shouldn't be a political process, and that's what you get the city in my neck of the woods. That's what you get if the city is in charge.
That's very interesting. And Jim?
Yeah. Well, in Britain we've been properly going through the recession, and particularly the public sector is still bearing the brunt of a recession. The Arts Council probably lost about a third of its money, and if you think about local authorities in Britain, probably the biggest supporter of culture, I would say that half of that money has gone. So we're all having to think very differently. I mean, life would be made much easier if we were 70% subsidized rather than 33% subsidized. But would it be better? I'm not sure. I think that Live's approach, and many of my colleagues in the north, across the north of England, are doing similar things, makes us hungry to succeed. It brings us into new territory. I think it brings us a wider set of political and financial and economic relationships, and in the end, I think, makes us stronger. It's a question many journalists have asked me, and I've said, on balance, although I have no experience of building office blocks on my CV, I think it makes us more deeply embedded in the city.
Okay, I haven't seen any last-minute questions come in, so let's call it a day there. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our two speakers today, to Tom Hoch from Hennepin Theatre Trust in Minneapolis, and to Jim Beirne from Live Theatre in Newcastle-upon-Tyne in England. Also thanks to Christopher Hua in Tom's team and Claire Overton in Jim's team. They both did an amazing amount of great work behind the scenes to make this happen. The next webinar is the same time, April the 28th. The subject is raising awareness. We'll be looking at Brussels Museum Night in Belgium and at the promotion of green space in Beirut in Lebanon. So I very much hope to see you then. So bye for now. Thank you.